Okay, this video will be focusing on how to hold and play with 4 mallets, and you will have a choice between 2 different types of technique. One is referred to as Stevens, named after creator Lee Howard Stevens, and the other is named Burton, after Gary Burton. Lee Howard Stevens is a marimbist and educator. Gary Burton is a vibraphonist. The differences between the instruments being that marimbas are generally made of wood and can range from most popular being 4 1/3 octaves to 5 octaves, but you will find marimbas for less octaves and up to 5 octaves. The vibraphone is made out of metal and has a pedal that you can use to control the amount of sustain that the instrument has, and generally ranges from 3 1/2 octaves to 4 1/2 octaves, and you can find sizes in between, the most popular being at least 4 octaves. To begin, you're going to want to have 4 of the same type of mallet. I use these generally on vibraphone, but sometimes also on marimba. They're wrapped in cord rather than yarn. Marimba mallets are generally wrapped in yarn, so they're on the harder side to activate the metal bars on the vibraphone. And the stick part of the mallet, the shaft, can be either birch, which is what these are. This is my preference, which is a wood that doesn't have very much give. It's very rigid. Or rattan, which is generally a little bit more expensive and has some give. So some players find it to be more comfortable because it moves along with the motion of actually striking. But it does tend to warp because it is more flexible. But also some players find that it's just more comfortable in your hands because it doesn't rub as much on your fingers depending on the type of technique you are playing with. Let's start with the Burton grip, which is for most people the easier of the two to get a hang of immediately. So taking one mallet first, you're going to want to just hold it like how you would a regular mallet. So fulcrum point being here, the index finger and thumb, creating a T, resting on that first knuckle, and the rest of your fingers just relaxing on the stick. Now, we'll grab your second mallet in between your index and middle fingers, closest to your hand. So on top of that mallet that's already in your hand, you're going to slide through until it crosses over. So in this grip, I just hold it here, the mallets actually form an X that you're holding on to. So that fundamental mallet grip is still there. We're just adding something in between and holding on with your fingers. The strokes, if you're doing a double lateral stroke, so both mallets playing at the same time, it'll be the same as if you're playing with one mallet, just up and down from the wrist, a knocking motion. For the outside mallet, it'll be that same knocking motion, but this time pivoting on this mallet. So if I was to hold this mallet in place, it's that same knocking motion, but instead of allowing both to move, just that one. The inside mallet, it's a rotation bringing your wrist from flat, parallel to the ground, to perpendicular. It'll be this sort of motion. So with the mallets, and if I'm holding the other mallet, still pivoting on the other mallet. Okay, those are our 3 super basic strokes. Now, the other technique is a little bit more complicated. In this one, a lot of the smaller muscles in your hands are going to be used, so it takes a long time generally for players to develop this technique. I don't recommend it for younger players just because they're still growing and it might be a little too heavy on their hands. But if you decide this is the technique for you, great. This is actually the technique I started with. So, start with the inside mallet. You'll take your hand, as if you're going to shake someone else's hand, and stick the mallet in the middle of your palm, the very tip of the mallet in the middle of your palm. Okay, now I'm going to bring the mallet around so that I'm going to balance it on that first knuckle of my index finger, keeping my hand out like I'm going to shake someone's hand. All right, now from here, I'm going to rest my thumb and form that same T that we've made when we're holding two mallets, or the Burton grip. All right. Then from here, my middle finger is just going to rest on the shaft, keeping it in place. Ring finger and pinky finger are not doing anything yet. All right, thumb stays flat. Everything is as relaxed as possible. We're only trying to keep everything in place. Outside mallet. In between ring and middle finger, and slide until there's enough mallet for you to grab. The goal is to have as little mallet sticking out from here as possible. So if Lee Howard Stevens was watching this, he'd be like that, if not less. I recommend that players who are just starting actually at least stick out to where their hand ends, just enough so that you don't see it on the other side of your palm, because this will make that outside mallet a little lighter on your hands. Now, our strongest fingers are definitely not our pinky and ring fingers. Those are the fingers we in everyday life tend to use less, so they're underdeveloped compared to thumb, index, and middle finger. So just until we develop a little bit more strength in those fingers, this is what I recommend you do. But me, I've been playing with Stevens for a while, so I'm gonna go back up here. Now, mallets do not touch each other. Not like in Burton where they form an X. They're completely independent of each other. Okay? Another thing that's important to note is that in this grip, we are not using that same knocking motion with our palms facing the floor as when we play with two mallets or with the Burton grip. Your hands will actually be facing each other this way the entire time, with your thumbs facing the ceiling. So my thumb is flat, facing the ceiling. Basic strokes: lateral stroke, double lateral stroke. Same idea, but this time instead of knocking motion, it'll be more of a, or if that's too much of an isolated motion, you can also think of it as a rotation from your forearm. So kind of like opening a doorknob from the side. And it looks like this with the mallets being held. Notice I'm not moving from the elbow. It's all primarily from the wrist. I'm trying to play 100% from the wrist. If not 100% from the wrist, there's a little bit of forearm motion, but definitely not from the elbow. Same thing for independent strokes, rotating on the axis of the mallet that isn't being used. So for outside mallet, if I hold my inside mallet, again, thinking about that opening a doorknob motion. Same thing with the inside mallet, rotating up higher, past neutral, and coming down. So those are your super basic double lateral and independent stroke techniques for both Burton and Stevens. One grip really isn't more beneficial over the other. They both have their pros and cons. It really comes down to what is more comfortable in your hands.